The Eastern Bluebird is a very popular native bird species to many of our local birders and non-birders. They are in our area throughout the year, which makes them really fun to watch. The males are a bright blue on their heads, back, and wings, with a bright orange breast and a white belly. Females, on the other hand, follow that same color pattern but are much less bright in their coloring, just to make them blend in a little more. Bluebirds prefer spaces that are open, so big open fields with small sections of tree throughout. So they aren't going to be typically seen in a forest, but will be seen in meadows and along a lot of our fields in the area. They nest in cavities, so they need standing dead trees that have hollows or woodpecker holes in them, or some of our bluebird houses. In fact, several decades ago, the bluebirds were actually declining to an extreme degree because of both partially because of both habitat loss and not having nesting sites. However, they have made a pretty remarkable comeback thanks in part to the increase in putting up of bluebird boxes. So it's a really great addition, especially to attract them to your yard. Now, if you do want to put up a bluebird box, it is important that you do have the proper habitat for them, because again, they can be a little picky. They don't like a lot of tree cover. They like having the open space. So making sure you do have open spaces for them. They also prefer nest sites that are 50 feet or less in terms of height, because they like being a little closer to the ground than some birds. One challenge to putting up a bluebird box is that they will compete with not only some of our native bird species, but also the invasive English sparrow. So you do have to be a little careful, and there is actually an alternative house you can put up that will help mitigate some of that competition. So there are two main styles of bluebird house. This is a pretty standard bluebird house where it has the hole in the center, just a round hole. Great option, but again, English sparrows will use these as well because they're about the same size. I think English sparrows may be a little bigger, but they're about the same size, which means they will use these holes. The other option for bluebird house is actually what's called a slot bluebird house. So as you can see, the entrance is actually a slot at the top of the house. English sparrows prefer not to use these. You will still get some competition with native species, but we like native species, so that's not the worst thing. We don't like invasive species like the English sparrow. So this is a great option if you do have heavy English sparrow pressure. Bluebirds also are primarily insect eaters, so what you'll often see is they'll hang out in some of the single trees or on an edge of a field and be looking out over the field, and then fly down, hover, find an insect, pick it up, and then either eat it or return to their nest to feed their young. So if you do want to feed bluebirds, a mealworm feeder is a great option to attract them. So these are two different mealworm feeders that you can offer. One is just a little tray that's going to have a protective cover on it. The other is a little more house-shaped. It has clear sides and then a hole that the bluebirds can go in. So you just put mealworms inside and the bluebirds go in and eat the mealworms. This one's a little trickier to use, but it keeps your mealworms a lot drier. Obviously, it's enclosed. These feeders are also really great because larger birds, like our starlings and other, jays and stuff, they also really like mealworms. But the hole on the end is too small for them. So you will filter out a lot of those bigger birds that might come in and eat all of the mealworms before the bluebirds are able to get them. So both good options for feeding some mealworms to your bluebirds. Additionally, in the winter months when insects aren't as plentiful, you will get bluebirds visiting different seed feeders, and they'll also eat fruits and berries on some of our local trees. During the winter or outside of breeding season, bluebirds typically will travel around in small flocks, which makes them pretty easy to see, especially because the bright blue of the male is really distinct against the browns of winter. Be on the lookout for bluebirds hanging out on wires or fences in your area as you're driving around. They're super fun to see, and we would encourage all of you to put up a bluebird house to bring them in.